Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello, and welcome to our second episode of Wrestling with Heart. This is a podcast talking about pro wrestlers giving back to their community, as well as people that have been involved in the wrestling business, helping out with different charities, helping out in the community, and just being good people, doing good deeds. And today we've got a very special guest with us. He is the founder and promoter of Southern Illinois Championship Wrestling. He's done it all. He's been in the business for 50 years, and we're going to speak today about SICW, and he's worked with so many legends. It's my honor to welcome to the show, Mr. Herb Simmons. Herb, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Stanley. I appreciate the invite, and anytime that we can come on to these outlets and talk about the business that we all had such a passion for, we're really willing and able to do that.
So where did you grow up, Herb? We'll start with that. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in East St. Louis, Illinois, right across the river from downtown St. Louis, Missouri. And at an early age, became addicted to, like all of us did, to professional wrestling. The housing projects that I lived in, there was a building about 2 blocks from there called the Social Center, and they used to have wrestling during the week there. And that's where I first met the people like Pat O'Connor, Cowboy Bob Ellis, Luthez. And, you know, it just grew from there. My mother was a huge wrestling fan, and that was what we would enjoy doing each week is, if we couldn't go to the matches, we'd watch them on TV.
I guess it was very popular in the community and in school. Did you ever get to play around with some of your friends?
Well, not so much that, but, I knew at an early age that I wanted to somehow chase that dream. And like so many of us have, people have chased it, but never did catch it. And I tell people I was the fortunate one that I chased it and caught it and got to live it by meeting who I consider was the greatest of all time, the promoter for over 41 years, Sam Muchnick. St. Louis was the hotbed of professional wrestling for many years. And then, of course, my good, dear late friend, Larry Matisek, he started working for Sam Muchnick when he was 16 years old and didn't even have a driver's license. His father would actually drive him over to the office, and I was, being his friend, I get to go with him sometimes and sit in there and listen to Sam have meetings with the likes of Big Thunder, Gene Kaniski, or Whipper Billy Watson, or the Funks and the Briscoes. And then later on in life, they've worked for me. So it's been a ride that I wouldn't exchange. Or everybody says, well, was there anything you would do over again? And I said, well, the only regret I have is, like Larry used to always say, my only regret is I can't redo it again,
No, that's like an experience that you can't duplicate because you could only do it once. You mentioned you were growing up as a fan. Like, really, what really got you hooked onto wrestling?
Well, our society has always been based on good against bad, good against evil. And so I think that was the fascinating part about it. Here you saw these 2 big grapplers in this squared circle and just going at it, throwing one another around. And, if you really got into it, you followed the storylines. And back then, of course, before the toothpaste got out of the tube, and to this day, there are still fans out there that go to each and every show they can. They still love the enjoyment. What I find is they love the old school, as we call it, more so than the new modern day stuff. And I'm the same way. I can't even watch what is on TV nowadays. I mean, I'll put in an old tape of a Dick the Bruiser against Ric Flair, or Dick the Bruiser against Bruiser Brody, or Jack Briscoe against Dory Funk Jr. And I can sit there and watch those type of matches all day long. And that's just everybody's preference. I'm just old school, have been and always will be. But, I got hooked on it just the same as everybody else did. They enjoyed got to boo the bad guys and cheer the good guys, and you had your favorites. And of course, you go to school, and some of your classmates would talk about it. And, there was always the macho ones that, that's this, that's that. And of course, they'd be the ones sitting over there with their ears open and listening to you talk about how Rip Hawk or John Paul Henning or Cowboy Bob Ellis beat this guy up. So Sam used to call those type of people closet fans. They didn't want to admit they liked it, but they knew everything about it.
It was the talk of the town, and once you were invested in it, you wanted to watch the next episode. And
yeah, it's definitely it's what keeps you sitting on the edge of your seats. And to this day, we still run shows every month. Sometimes multiple times a month, and to see the fans sitting there on the edge of their seats, or they're standing up cheering, and like I said, giving the raspberries to the bad guys and getting on the referees because he didn't see something. What I tell them is for 2.5 hours, I'm gonna take you into the world of make believe. And it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain. You don't care who's behind the curtain. You're just for 2.5 hours. You don't care about what's going on other than some good entertainment. And then I try to stand at the door at the end of the show at the night, and I thank people for coming. And they'll tell me, they'll say, Mr. Simmons, just as we thought we had this figured out, you pull a rabbit out of your hat. And that's what you like. You like when the fans keep coming back for more. And nowadays with our cell phones and cameras, our shows get over with between 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And by the time we've cleaned up and left the auditorium or the building, they're posting pictures from our shows, and they're sending me messages and, hey, what's going to be next month's show? You ought to do this, you ought to do that. So it's definitely that's when you got them hooked, and that's what you really feel good about.
It's that suspense of disbelief, like you mentioned with magic. The magician's pulling the rabbit out of the hat, and he's taking his time just to kind of showing people how he did the magic trick. And yet with pro wrestling, it's kind of similar.
Exactly. And you take these fans buy into it, and you make them a part of it. You make them feel like, oh my gosh, we're actually sitting right here at ringside. And then with our TV, we're one of the few independent promotions that do TV just like they did back in the old days.
In your opinion, why do you feel St. Louis is such a hotbed for professional wrestling?
One person, Sam Muchnick. Sam Muchnick was the president. He was a sports writer. And of course, I've got all the programs from all those years that they used to send out to their fans. The oldest one I got goes back to 1934. But I've got every show that ever took place, every card at the Kiel Auditorium in St. Louis, or the Chase, or the Checker Dome. I have all of those. Plus, I have every match that ever took place at St. Louis. If you want to know how many matches Dick the Bruiser had, or Bruiser Brody, or Ric Flair, I can tell you how many, who he took on, who won, what the attendance was at the Kiel Auditorium.
Wow.
So, I got all that from Sam. Larry had got it from Sam when Sam passed away. Sam was the peacekeeper, as we called him, when all these other territories were part of the National Wrestling Alliance, the NWA.
It was the governing body.
It was, but Sam was the one that kind of controlled the championship belt at that time. But then when it would be defended in some of these other territories, and you may have a couple of these other promoters not getting along, and they wanted this guy to have the title, or they wanted this guy to go up against this guy, and they'd get into a little feud, and Sam would be the one who would say, look, what's best for the business? And he would convince them what was best for the business. And that's why he was so successful. He was president a couple of different times, but for a total of about 41 years. And even the period of times that he wasn't the president of the NWA, the president that would still confide in him would call him and pick his brain and, hey, I got this scenario. What would you do? And Sam was kind of the godfather that held it all together. And Ric Flair told the story in his book that, if it wasn't for Larry Matisek, he never would have got to St. Louis, because they had sent a tape in, and Larry and I was in the control room that day, and Larry fell in love with him right away and said, man, this guy can sell some tickets. And of course, Pat O'Connor is a name you may have heard of,
Yeah, yeah.
was the booker during that time. And he called him in the control room, and O'Connor said, he's too small. He'll never do any business here. And Larry called Sam at the office and said, hey, can you come down to the studio? He said, I want you to see something. And about a half hour later, Sam showed up, and he watched about 5 minutes of Flair in action. And he said, get a hold of Crockett and tell him I want him in St. Louis. And that's how Ric Flair got to St. Louis.
Wow, just so much. You're like a walking encyclopedia of just all things St. Louis wrestling. That's so phenomenal.
And it was so, and Sam's philosophy was is if two things, and I try to live by that to this day. He always told me, you treat the boys right, they'll treat you right. Mm-hmm. And if you give the fans a good product, the fans will continue to come back. And so February of next year will be my 50th year that I've lived by those two things that he told me. And of course, I had the great pleasure, because of Sam and more so Larry Matisek, like I said, who started for him when he was 16 years old. And he'd done everything from sweeping the floor at the office to writing some of the programs, to calling in the results to the local radio stations after a big match when the Kiel Auditorium would sell out at 12,800 people. Mm-hmm. So he worked his way up. And then, of course, when Sam retired, he started his own promotion for, just about a year before Vince McMahon in '83 come in and bought the TV out from underneath him.
Yeah.
And of course, during that whole time, him and I was running these independent shows with guys like Bruiser Brody, Dick Murdoch, Crusher Blackwell, Greg Valentine. We had our own little thing on the side going. And And that's what I keep doing to this day. You talk about giving back, and that's what we've done for all these years is we work with nonprofit organizations, to be it the fire departments, police departments, 501c3 organizations that try to raise funds. Last year, we raised $40,000 in one show for a fire chief who was diagnosed with throat cancer. We've got one fire department over 8 years. We raised over $40,000 for. And those are repeat customers that come back. We don't run around and knock on a door and say, hey, we want to come into a wrestling show here. And, we want to help those communities raise funds, especially after the pandemic. A lot of organizations couldn't hold their fundraisers. And so, like last month, we had 5 shows in 1 month of helping people raise funds.
That had to have been just such a tough time for you guys too, because you're an independent promotion, and you're struggling to make money while people are losing their jobs, and you have to find a way to kind of make ends meet.
Well, and on the independent market, wrestling is not like a way. Everybody says, well, when will wrestling at the Chase come back? Well, and I have to be the bearer of the bad news to tell all of them. It's never coming back the way we remember it, because the people who made it so successful are not with us anymore. Sam Muchnick, all the names that I've been naming, the John Paul Hennings, the Johnny Valentines, Fritz von Erich. Those were the people who put the butts in the seats, and there just isn't any of them anymore on the independent market. And I hate the word independent, because I try to tell the guys and gals all the time, when you go to these states where they require you to be a licensed wrestler, it doesn't say independent wrestler, it says professional wrestling. So when you talk about independent, you're kind of minimizing, and you're kind of demoralizing your statue in the business. So but it is, it's kind of what they say, the minor league. My guys are by far not the minor league. I got guys in my locker room been with me 20 plus years. Guys who were trained by Harley Race, if you've heard that name before.
Yes, very familiar with them. King of the Ring.
One of the greatest of all times. So I've got guys that were trained by him, and they do a good honor to him when they're in the ring. Just a couple of weeks ago, one of those guys were in a steel cage match against the Faces of Fear, Haku and Barbarian. A great match. A year or two ago, one of those guys took on Tommy Dreamer, So,
Oh, wow.
I've had the fortune of being able to bring in those legends. I mean, we just had a show, like I said, with the Faces of Fear.
Yep.
Last month we had Jerry Lawler, Jimmy Hart, Sergeant Slaughter, Cowboy Bob Orton Jr. runs my training academy for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I was part of giving Randy Orton his first match
Whoa,
back
wow.
about 22 years ago.
That's
So,
crazy. That's
yeah.
so cool.
Yeah, I kid Bob Orton. I say, hey, tell Randy to send me a check, So, but no, Randy's a great guy. I remember
Yes.
when he first started training, and then of course he had his match with us in St. Louis, and then he went down to OVW and furthered his
The rest is history.
wrestling area. Yeah. So but Bob runs my Ace Academy on Tuesdays and Thursday nights, and is doing real good of training some of the new talent coming up. And that's what we need, because got to make room for the future.
I know you mentioned earlier about some of the fundraisers that you guys have done. Tell me a little bit about, like, give me a few names of some of the people that you've worked with, as far as like giving money and helping out.
As far as the fundraisers, Missouri Athletic Club, we've been there twice, 2 years in a row now for them. The first year we had Ric Flair booked there for him. He had to cancel. We ended up getting Ted DiBiase in about a 48-hour notice to come in and stand in.
Yeah.
But they're an organization that does a lot of scholarships for the people and for the youth. But the fire departments, the Swansea Fire Department, the Caseyville Fire Department, State Park Fire Department, Dupo Fire Department, the town of Millstadt, Illinois. We've been in there 8-9 years in a row farm. Belleville, we just did the big show in Belleville for an organization there. And like I said, the fire chief, we raised $40,000 for in one night show for him. But again, we advertise, if you're an organization that is looking to raise funds, the thing that I think sets us apart too is we'll come in and sit down with you. And after we review what your needs are, we're going to tell you. We're not going to, because if we don't help you succeed in making money, you're not going to want us to come back.
Right.
And so, but I can tell pretty quickly if you've got an organization that is full of vim and vigor that are going to take the bull by the horn and go out there and help promote it, help push the tickets. I'm working on one now. They're wanting people like Sergeant Slaughter, Jerry Lawler, JBL, people like that. And it's a big organization. It's doing that. So if that comes off, that'd be a big one. But again, when you're talking about helping some of these organizations raise anywhere from 10, 20, 30, $40,000, it makes you feel good when you know that money's going for a good cause.
It's just so, amazing to see that, you've got all this passion for professional wrestling. And why do you feel passionate about what you do?
I loved it. It's I can sit and talk with the best of them about it because I've lived it. I get accused from some of the opposition that I want to control everything. No, I don't want to control anything. I want you as a promotion to do your thing. I have my opinion if you're doing it the right way or the wrong way. If you don't want to hear my opinion, don't pick up the phone and call me and say, hey, what should I do? Because if I'm going to take the time and the air, because I'm an old man, I tell some of these younger guys, I'll give you all the knowledge that I can give you. Then it's up to you to take and decide if it works for you like it's worked for me. And I've got a couple of good friends that are promoters, Scotty Z, who runs New Breed Wrestling down in southern Missouri, in the Eldon, Missouri area, where Harley Race basically made his home. Another guy, Pat, we call him the Searcher, runs ACW. Those guys have what it takes to want to even do better than what they're doing now. And they'll call me, and especially Scott will say, I got this show I'm doing. I'd like to try to get to this point. Any suggestions? And by gosh, I'll throw in my two, and I'll always say, no, you don't have to do it, but this is what I would do. And he'll do it. And then he'll call me and say, boy, Herbie was right. It worked. The fans loved it. But then there are more of the other type of promotions that, because they watch Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, and Friday night on TV, they think they know it all, which is fine if that's what they want. But, we get accused of, because we do draw good, we give the fans the best quality product that we can give them for a reasonable price. We do a lot of advertisement of our shows. I don't know if you follow us on social media.
Yes. I gotta say, want to give a special shout out to Lucky P. Larson,
Esquire.
He's
a pain in my behind.
He told me that he commentates for SICW, so I checked out a few of the shows and I was impressed. I thought it was really awesome.
Yeah, he does.
Fantastic.
I got to meet Lucky through my friend Bert Prentice.
Yeah.
And when I was down there, as I told you, working, and he's fit right into my broadcast team here. Dr. Drew has been with me a long time, a young man that stumbled on to Larry Matisek and I back, it seems like 20 years ago now. And we were promoting, Larry and I actually took 12 volumes of the Wrestling at the Chase tapes that we have and reproduced them on DVD, and we were putting them up on the market. And so Dr. Drew Ebenhaus, as we call him, came along and started helping out and learned a lot from Larry, and is basically stepped right in where Larry had left off when Larry passed away. And Drew's kind of my right-hand guy. He puts all of him and Lucky work together.
Where can people find more about you and SICW?
SICW.org. They can go on there. We even have a little merchandise store on there. They can order some items that we're putting on there slowly but surely, some collectible items. But I'm the easiest guy to find on social media under Herb Simmons, or they can go on YouTube, SICW Explosion. We're have our own Roku channel that they can catch us on.
Well, Herb, we can talk so much about wrestling and the tradition and history of the St. Louis territory, but I just want to say thank you very much for coming on and doing this with me. It means a lot, and I would love to have you on again sometime.
Or anytime you need some time, Phil, just call me. Like I said, we can talk about anything. If I can ever help you with getting anybody on, just reach out to me. If you got something you need to fill, they'll be more than glad to do it.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.